Jed. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I have 2 years in recovery. Today I am a son, I'm a brother, I'm a good friend, and an uncle.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. If you could start off by sharing some about your childhood.
I sure can. I grew up in a large family. I'm the second of 8 kids. Grew up out in Pataskala, Ohio, in a what we'd call a pretty traditional, functional family. I think every family is dysfunctional in its own way. But my parents have been married for 45 years. All of my 7 siblings have married wonderful people. Some strong morals and values implemented from a young age. Most of us were homeschooled through at least 6th or 8th grade. So I grew up kind of sheltered. And I think high standards of character and spirituality, morality were built into us from a young age. And they're mostly good memories. And then in 9th grade, it was sort of a new phase of my life. They threw me into public high school. And so my world got a lot bigger. The people I connected with, the friends I made, and some of the stuff I get into at that point. It's just kind of the new chapter, and it got a little rockier at that point.
Okay. So, is that when you first became introduced to alcohol or substances?
Late in high school, yeah, there was never any smoking, drinking, cussing, any of that going on in my home growing up. I was absolutely not exposed at all to any of that. We'd see it in movies, and it was the villain in the movie who was smoking or drinking beer,
Right.
and that was just never present in my family. But I would say my junior year in high school, through high school, I worked at a catering job. And one day, no peer pressure, no depression, no real influence behind it, I just decided to steal a big bottle of wine out of the cooler at my work and bring it home on a sunny Sunday afternoon, make a sandwich, watch some basketball on TV, and drink that whole bottle. It wasn't like I want to have a beer or a glass of wine. I'm going to drink this whole thing and see what it does. So I don't know where that came from.
And what did it for you?
The clouds parted, the sun came out, everything was perfect. My anxiety went away. It was what alcohol and drugs are supposed to do for you. They did exactly that then. And I've heard many people share their experience and say something to the effect of, and I knew I wanted to do this for the rest of my life. I was going to do this all the time. And that was the feeling that I had. And so I might have gotten drunk or high a handful of times through the rest of high school, but it wasn't, I didn't see it as an addiction, but that opened the door. And I would say my first 2 years of college, I went to Ohio State, and I was living on campus, and became pretty much a weekly event to drink with friends. I still wasn't really a solitary drinker or user. But about my junior year, my friends were they were growing up, they were getting internships, they were working jobs, and I felt like I was just stuck mentally in having to drink, having to get high. And from 2003 till really pretty much 2021 when I got sober, it's a long, very predictable blur. 2004, I basically went back to school, and was howlingly drunk, pretty much nonstop. Staying in school, having to withdraw a handful of different quarters because I just wasn't keeping up with the work. But in 2004, it was my very first attempt at any kind of treatment, and I went to a long-term men's program that I made it, I think, about 10 months, but then got drunk and was kicked out of there. Happened a different place the next year. Limped along and worked a little bit for the next couple of years. Moved out of state, same thing. Came back to Columbus, same thing. And I mean, I did the math, I think over the course of about 16 years, I might have spent a combined 10 of those 16 years cumulatively in some kind of residential treatment recovery environment. I mean, I really made a life
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
Um, and the drinking only got worse. I've used a good handful of different chemicals, but hard liquor was always there. It was the most reliable thing. It was the cheapest thing for me to get to, but it didn't stop with that. In desperate times, over more recent years, I mean, I'd sent cologne, rubbing alcohol, mouthwash, hand sanitizer down. I mean, anything that would get me out of me. And so it wasn't just the addictive habits. It was there was just something in my character and in my spirit that have been was completely atrophied for a long time. I wasn't working. I wasn't driving. All the things they say you're supposed to do as a grown man. I mean, I wasn't accomplishing any of that. I couldn't even stay sober for a month outside of treatment walls.
Right. Well, it sounds kind of like Groundhog's Day. That it was just kind of over and over, just different stories and whatnot. So let's get into the good stuff. So what happens that you decide, you know what, I want to do something different, or how does this change come about? What do you do?
After probably a few dozen attempts at residential treatment, I was in a really good place. It was about this time, 2019. I had a good friend gave me an old car. I had a good job come through. I was living in some sober housing. Nice girl I was talking to. I had the things in place I thought were really gonna make me happy. But I drank and got kicked out of my housing. She broke up with me, and I had an OVI in that car, and I got impounded. So to have all that kind of fall apart, to destroy that in one day, it's right almost exactly 4 years ago. There was something in me that just took that really hard. And I said, I know the information, I just haven't done the work. And so I went through a 30-day residential again, got into another sober housing, was there for a few months, and drank one last time, September 10th of 21. And I'd had a couple good months there that I really felt like I was making progress, working with a sponsor and doing the work. And although there wasn't much physical in the way of consequence from those drinks I had on September 9th and 10th, there was something in me emotionally that was so tremendously fed up. It was just the straw that broke the camel's back. I feel like that had these recent consequences with the OVI, and had kind of picked myself back up from that and was taking the right steps. And why did I drink again? And I just got really mad, I think, at myself and just at the disease. For the first time in my life was I legitimately, appropriately furious about it. So I'll just, at that point, about 2 years ago, a little under 2 years ago, there was something in my head, something in my heart that kind of clicked and said, what's it going to take? So I had to go through a 30-day detox and residential one more time, and had the opportunity to get into a men's year-long recovery program. And
here in Columbus?
It's here in Columbus. It's down on the south end. It's called Serenity Street. And it's faith-based, and I grew up in that. My father worked in church ministry for years, and I'd had this head knowledge of what I thought God was, or who I thought God was, and I could, as people have said, I knew the answers on the test, but I didn't really have a personal experience of spiritual growth or character change. It was stuff I thought I knew, but it wasn't something that I was really living out. All that to say, going into Serenity Street, there's an emphasis on the spiritual piece. They're also very heavy into 12-step recovery. But that piece, growing in community, working through all the necessary character growth and spiritual growth areas with my sponsor and with the community around me, it was a perfect template for what I personally needed the most at that point in my life.
So what do you do on kind of a daily, weekly basis to be able to maintain your physical health, your mental health, and your spiritual health?
There's just there's some things first thing in the morning just to walk, um, to get in some different inspirational readings. There's some people I call early on. There's a handful of disciplines having to do with just self-care most mornings that I incorporate, and I do them while I'm half asleep, and they just they help me get centered. They help me be grounded. I mean, it's nothing crazy. It's just, walk, make a phone call, read something, drink my coffee, um, and I find that helps me start my day off right.
It's your routine. Very cool.
Routine has been my lifesaver. Even when I don't want to do it, even when I don't feel motivated or inspired. Motivation and inspiration are feelings, and so I'm not always gonna feel like doing what I'm supposed to do, but I just do it anyway. I kind of act my way into that right thinking, and that has proven to be so valuable. Just to, when in doubt, do the healthy thing that you do at this time of day, and that's what I do. Yeah.
So after leaving, a pretty supportive environment, and making that transition, if you could talk about what life looks like today in the different areas.
Sure. Well, when I graduated that program last year, I moved into their alumni housing, which is just across the street, for a few months. And then they asked if I wanted to come back over and be the resident manager at the intake house, because the other guy's year was up of his commitment. And so I did that, which has kept me in that circle, provided me with some responsibility, having made another commitment. But also right about that same time, there's a lady I run into sometimes at some recovery meetings I was going to with a friend who works for a nonprofit who works primarily with people in mental health, but had gotten a grant to expand into the recovery field. And so they basically wanted to take on a peer supporter. And I hadn't actually finished up the classes at that point, but she really encouraged me to pursue that. And so I got the certification. I came on with that place, and they had me stationed at an outreach center on the west side, Jordan's Crossing, which is a beautiful place that are meeting a lot of needs for people in that area. That area desperately needs love.
Right.
So I've been working out of there for about the last 6 months while managing the men's house. So that's from the time I wake up till the time I go to bed. I'm surrounded by people who are pursuing recovery or maybe are struggling to achieve it, but it's front and center all the time.
Could you share some words of hope or inspiration that when you're struggling that really speak true to you?
Words that really hit me when I'm struggling. People often say, God won't give you any more than you can handle. I heartily disagree with that in a sense. And my point is that when I go to the gym, if I'm lifting, to build muscle, it has to break down first. There has to be a point of failure where I'm not going to get this. And so when you're straining there in that pain and discomfort against the unliftable weight, is actually doing damage to the muscles, but then they come back stronger. So you actually build by breaking down. The things in my life where I've grown, where I can really look and see where there was growth, is where I came up to something that I could not handle. I didn't quit, I didn't run, but I had to ask for help. Somebody had to spot me, as it were, in that point of failure. And I came back stronger through that. So I think God gives me, anyway, many, many things that I can't handle. He knows I'm going to get through it, and it will get handled. But at that moment just reminds me of my need for help, of my need for grace, of my need for the people around me. I think that helps with humility. And the people in my life, as different as they are, if somebody's humble, if they're teachable, if they ask for help, if they can receive criticism, thanks for making me better, not, why are you attacking me? There's a real difference in how people handle input. If I can be that way, we've got an abundance of wisdom around in the people around us. And so coming up against something that's too much for me, it's not an obstacle, it's an opportunity for growth.
Absolutely. Is there anything that we missed that you would like to talk about?
I guess just this, about 8 years ago, it was probably my lowest physical point in addiction. I was out of state, homeless, and Kansas City, Missouri, and there were record sub-zero days in a row, talking January, February of 2014. I ended up blackout drunk, sleeping outside for a couple of days, and lost 7 toes to frostbite.
Oh my.
So I have no toes on my right foot, and I got the smallest 3 on my left, and that sidelined me for a while. But I'm almost 43. I'm in the best shape of my life, and I still get 10 or 11 miles in a day. So don't tell me you can't walk.
That is fantastic. Well, thank you.
We're a resilient bunch.
We are.
If I can do it, you can do it.
Well said. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your very full life to be able to share your story. It's your story of redemption is really going to help somebody out there.